guess we'll be testing this. Don't worry, I will continue with the guitar concert afterwards. The gracious sponsor of the prize, Michael Irvin, actually told me if we wait enough, it will turn into a dance floor here. So we can continue, and that's why I had my bar stool here and everything else. But thank you for deeming me worthy of this honor. It is really great to be with yourselves here today on the eve of the local elections tomorrow. So I'll be rushing to vote in my country right after the ceremony. It strengthens for me to know actually that we are not alone. Those of us that are in this struggle in Turkey to keep secularism alive and our country to produce a synthesis, a reconciliation between Islam, democracy, and secularism, and not to lose in our journey towards modernity. I know that I'm supposed to talk primarily about Turkey. That is my great NSS organizers told me and invited me to speak about, thinking that you may be also wondering what's going on in our country. And I came with fresh news for you, right from the field. This week, as you may know, along with Twitter and YouTube, the film Noah was also banned on religious grounds in Turkey. The YouTube ban actually came right after a leaked recording of a conversation between military and political leaders who were caught allegedly, I mean, it was actually confirmed by the Prime Minister's office and Foreign Affairs Office afterwards, that the conversation was real and took place, that by which we all learned that the government members were preparing to force a flag attack to launch war in Syria in order for it to gain them more support towards the local elections this weekend. We could not decide which one was more horrendous, whether the content of the conversation or whether the such confidential high-level conversation can be illegally taped and leaked. Accordingly, the state's Religious Affairs Directorate called for a Friday sermon to be read out in all mosques across 81 provinces of the country, which was done yesterday. All mosques actually read out this sermon, saying, in summary, "Don't blow a hole in the ship's hull," meaning that don't let the government lose, vote for the government for this weekend's local election. The mayor of Ankara, from the governing AKP, cried on the TV the other evening, saying that if the citizens vote for the main opposition Social Democrat CHP member, I will not give my blessing to those voters for afterlife. He also added that he would chase them in the other world. Isn't it all very exciting already? Well, last week, it doesn't end here. Last week, a Norwegian tourist in my country came across a minister visiting the area for the local elections campaign in a holiday city, a Norwegian tourist. The minister stopped by to talk to him, and the tourist immediately hid the beer he was holding in his hand behind his back. There are no laws yet forbidding drinking beer or showing it. But when he saw a group of clearly pious people, his instinct was to hide the beer. That is why we have to be secular, to protect individuals from what triggered that tourist's instinct. I would like to list a few more things that have taken place in my country, some of which we only found out following the crisis prosecution recordings of the phone calls between government officials that have been leaking online since December in my country. According to these conversations, the Prime Minister did not know how to hide hundreds of millions of dollars stashed at his home, first resorting to immediately buying new houses on the same day of the police operation that started for anti-corruption operation. His ministers took countless bribes of insurmountable amounts. They had a fatwa issued to declare that bribery is legal from a religious perspective. They did. Foreign jihadists from Libya, Tunisia, Afghanistan, Chechnya, and many other countries have been armed by Turkey and brought to our most multicultural borderline city, Hatay, to fight in Syria. According to these leaked conversations, officials were greatly worried. This came out last week, actually. Officials were greatly worried that weapons they were smuggling into Nigeria would be killing Muslims instead of Christians. They have been firing Alevis, a minority in my country, the biggest religious minority, from civil service positions. They have shut down birth control clinics that have been already in place and have abolished abortion services in state hospitals without even having any relevant law in place. It has also been confirmed that the government's dark propaganda claiming that the Gezi Park protesters drank beer in the mosque where they had to take a refuge to hide from police brutality, and that they raped a pious woman in a square in the daylight, have all been found falsified by evidence after 6 months. According to the Prime Minister's own words, the judges and prosecutors are to be appointed based on whether they pray or not. In his exact words, whether their forehead touches prostration or not, and not according to their merits and expertise. Same goes for the state scientists and academicians as for their appointments. Believe me, this list can go on forever. Of course, the ratings for the Hollywood series, if you know, I'm not sure, the House of Cards, have been plummeting in my country because we have our own political reality show that has much more intricacies than House of Cards. So I will stop here for your sake. But I ask, in a democratic country, shouldn't just one of these be enough for a government to step down, for officials to resign? How is then the Turkish government still standing, especially as it claims to be the party of religious values and morality? I just would like to recap this part and then leave you with it. Well, in the Middle East, my country is always pointed to as the most modern country in the region. However, due to our common majority belief, all Middle Eastern countries are variations of some sort. Therefore, this phenomenon is applicable to the entire region in varying degrees. Foreign policy is often conducted on the basis of religious differences, religious divide. Let's say Israel and Palestine. Let's say Iran and Saudi Arabia are examples. It is often the basis of domestic fault lines between citizens. The most powerful example I can think of is the civil war in Syria right now. But we can also look at the situation of Coptic Christians in Egypt or Alevi minority in Turkey. It is quite clear that religious beliefs affect our social, political governance and relationships greatly. Here, I would like to share a real story from my country about a church restoration. While receiving an award on secularism, you may find it odd that I'm talking about the church restoration, but trust me, the meaning of the story is bigger than the church itself, so I will take the risk. In a historic church restoration project by the Ministry of Culture, they appointed a civil servant architect to observe the project on behalf of the ministry. On the occasion of the startup of the project, this civil servant started laying fig tree seeds around the building, around the historic building, whenever he could avoid the team's attention. This may be meaningless to you. However, it has a very significant place in our culture as a curse. The roots of fig trees spread over a very wide area. The secreted acid is disposed from its leaves, while its powerful roots are draining and drying the earth around it, therefore destroying any building close to it. Therefore, in our culture, the saying, to plant a fig tree in somebody's home, means a curse. Literally and metaphorically destroying that person's home, it means. In fact, in Ottoman times, a sultan has even decreed a fatwa to ban planting fig trees anywhere close to a building or a monument. And here, a civil servant who is supposed to help restore a historic building, a historic monument that belongs to mankind, actually instead hopes to destroy it from the evil powers of a fig tree because of what he believes in. There is no direct attack that he does. He does not use any violence, but it stems from the deeply embedded antagonism towards another faith, which any other faith does have. That is why we must be secular. If we are to respect one another's boundaries, be it political, physical, ethnic, or religious, or personal, and not to dry the roots of each other's existence. The closest we have ever gotten to reconcile these differences, and the only thing that offers any hope to permanently solve them, is secularism. Indeed, in the Middle East, we need secularism more than anywhere else. As a realist and as someone who believes in individual freedom, my aim is not to curtail faith or diminish the closeness individuals feel towards God. However, in order to protect the freedoms of all, we have to keep faith out of the public sphere and resist its natural inclination to spread to the public sphere as well. We're going through a giant ideological struggle. The fanaticism of religion and the consequent barriers to human advancement attempts to seek refuge under the guise of cultural rights. We are taking one of the biggest gambles in human history with cultural rights, I think. Today, religion is attempting to take the guide of culture in order to preserve its unquestionable authority that it inherits from history. The dynamics of this culture of faith is absorbing diversity, withering, and eventually eradicating it. In Western countries, the situation is paralleled through the rights of women to have a right the way that they use their body, or the right to carry or wear religious symbols, or the rights of LGBT community members to marry. And I do not want to trivialize in any way the importance of these issues whatsoever. However, in Turkey and the rest of the Middle East, situations born out of the same religious instincts and intentions and beliefs concern violence towards women on the basis of their morality, whether they behave immorally or not, violation of individuals' right to life, to work, and to be able to display their identities without fear of assault on their lifestyles. I hope you won't think this is big ego, but I believe the stakes in our struggle is a bit higher. If we fail to expose this religious invasion of culture, we will be inviting the same religious tyranny that humanity was openly subjected to in a more subtle way through public and political institutions. The Western world visibly showed its excitement and enthusiasm towards AKP, the governing party, the Islamist governing party in Turkey, when they came to power in 2002. It was presented to the world as an Islamic country that had democratically rid itself from the authoritarian secularists, instead introducing democratic Muslims. Then it was expected of Turkey to contribute to peace and reconciliation between nations and religions in the region. But two crucial details were missed in calculating all this. First of all, the Islamists had been part of different national coalitions and local governments across the country since the 90s, and therefore they were very much part of the establishments that they were complaining about. Secondly, a democratic rule was being expected from a religion that would command the populace on all aspects of private life, which means how to use the bathroom, how to have sex with your partner, how to use private finances, to raise children, what to wear, what to say, what to eat. The great significance of Turkey as a model was that its founder had a vision to take the unprecedented step of establishing a secular state in an Islamic world when there were no other models available before him. The new Islamists, however, had many examples before their eyes, in front of them, after a century of country's establishment, and nevertheless, they still chose a lifestyle that goes back 1,500 years ago, that existed then as the model for their rule in the world of today. We no longer have secular education in Turkey. Girls and boys are separated in school classrooms. University students by gender are separated in campuses. Evolution theory is no longer in the school textbooks. 90,000 mosques are used as propaganda machinery for the government, including for this weekend's local election campaigns. According to the latest figures, 1 out of 3 marriages are child brides. Honor killings have increased 14 times in the past 7 years. Alcohol has become invisible outside of the areas of international tourism. Civil servants and job applicants are now subjected to religious exams. We have always had problems with authoritarianism in Turkey. I cannot and would not defend the military regimes and the oppressive state of past decades. However, those authoritarian regimes took issue with what you did. Today's religious regime takes issue with who you are on top of what you do. Islamist power have always blamed the secularists as being elites. However, if secularism is still alive in my country, among half of the population, it is not because of the elites, but thanks to the Alevi minority and the secular nature of their beliefs, who are the poorest layer of the society in Turkey. This is the reason behind AKP's explicit antagonism towards Alevi minority, even including having them booed at the election rallies, while showing a tolerance on the surface for those tiny non-Muslim minorities, which is very difficult for those of you who are outside of our culture to understand the difference. We are indebted to Alevis for their fortitudes and their ability to keep up with their culture of folk songs and dances, which are performed women and men together equally, which resisted against the prohibitions of the fanatical fundamentalism of the dominant culture, by which the voice of a woman is sinful. Sculpting, dancing, songs, painting are all forbidden, where relationships of men and women are greatly restricted and have been for 1,000 years. It is commonly held view in our culture that if you are not pious, then you are immoral. And morality almost exclusively revolves around the chastity of women. This creates a strange relationship between sins and crime. Supremacy of the law, by which we mean secular law, is often presented as the founding stone of the modern democratic order. It is natural the different countries apply this principle with slight variations in accordance with local cultures. However, when a large segment of a society absolutely believes in the supremacy of religious law and rejects any other kind of law, how can we convince them to accept secular law and secularist practices in their daily lives? How can we? It is not a rational or logical position, as said by those who took stage here before me, and arguments of reason cannot counteract it. How do we separate the consequent blurring of the lines between public law and individual sin? That is our question. If the political order of a country and the public support towards political parties are determined based on piety and religious criteria, where the law is not secular in nature anyways, how can it ever guarantee the lives and livelihoods of those that do not fit the criteria? How can it reconcile the differences of those who believe in different religions? Well, unfortunately, ours is the last secular struggle in the Middle East. Secularism has been defeated in the region, and the odds are not in our favor in Turkey whatsoever. In this deep cultural conflict, now it is the times of our last struggle to exist. And the outcome of this conflict will certainly affect the entire world to a far larger degree than the Western policymakers suspect. And who knows, maybe we may be able to beat the odds. We will continue finding ways to survive. Perhaps we should try to learn from each other's experiences. Finally, I also would like to end this speech on a positive note and congratulate the first same-sex couple to wed in the UK. I congratulate them wholeheartedly. And thank you very much for listening and for your patience.